The first thing I want to say is that we're recording today's session because we want to share the results of today, like all the other webinars, online with those who couldn't be here today. If you prefer not to be part of this recording, please just send an email to my colleague Carita, and we will make sure that you're left out of the recording that is shared online, of course, no problem. That being said, we can start, and I first want to say something about the FAIR project, just for everybody's memory, before we go into today's program. So as most of you know, the FAIR project is about preparing the Kvarken region for early implementation of electric aviation. And we're doing a lot of different things within that project around that topic. We're increasing the knowledge base, investigating the possibilities, and surveying the needs from a technical point of view, but also from a societal point of view and an innovation point of view. And we really see, together with our partners, that FAIR is a first step towards rapidly introducing this kind of aviation in the region. We have 3 work packages, and we're happy to have the second webinar since the project has been expanded towards the Norwegian side, which means that in work package 1, regional effects, we will have Umeå University, University of Vasa, and Noorduniversitetet working together. In work package 2, we're looking at the guidelines for implementation, which is run by Biofuel Region and supported by Mid-Scandia. And then we have today, of course, also a focus on the cross-border innovation process, which is run by Asset Rise. And for those of you who are a little bit less familiar, I think I see everyone, almost everyone probably knows this, but we're talking about specifically the Kvarken region today. The narrowest part of the Gulf of Bothnia is called Kvarken, and the project has started with the Finnish and Swedish sides of that, and has now, as you can see, been expanded towards the Norwegian side. So we really have a very nice east to west band of Scandinavia that we are working with here. And just a short moment to thank all the financiers and supporting partners. The project is owned by the Kvarkenrådet and funded partly by Interreg Botnia Atlantica, but we're very fortunate and lucky to have a lot of different financiers and supporting partners from public and private sector that are making this project possible. So that was a general introduction about the FAIR project. Today we're talking about Volta. Volta, as some of you have seen it already, is a speculative proposal of how regional electric aviation could work in an on-demand way. And we've chosen today to have a short presentation of what this design is, followed by a panel discussion. We have 3 esteemed panelists with us today that were nice enough to share some of their time and will share some of their thoughts running Volta. I think it's a good moment to maybe introduce all of them very briefly. If you could just say who you are, where you work, and what your interest is related to this topic. Elisabeth Kivimaki from Into Seinäjoki, please go ahead.
Hello everyone, and greetings from Finland and Seinäjoki. And I work for Into Seinäjoki, which is a regional development company and a business center. So we work very closely with companies in our region, and we are also part of this FAIR project and some other aviation-related projects. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. Melinda, can you say hi?
Hello. My name is Melinda. I work at the same unit as Jeroen and Carita, Societal Transformation at RISE. I'm a service designer and I'm an expert in norm criticism and norm critical innovation. So yeah, that's my perspective in the panel today. Thank
Excellent. You. Very happy that you can join us. And then lastly, Hampus Alfredson, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, and hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me, Jerome, to this interesting session. I'm currently working as a researcher at RISE, also in the unit for electromobility. We primarily do research around things like, well, the systems perspectives around electric vehicles and electric vehicle fleets, which often boils down to things like infrastructure for charging and planning, business models, policy frameworks, etc. And since basically 1.5 years back, I've also been involved quite a lot in the research around electric aviation in the FAIR project and in several other projects, mostly regarding infrastructure at airports.
Very good. I'm very happy that we have very different perspectives here today gathered in the panel so that we can look at this Volta thing and the implications that it might have from different points of view. So here you see the program for today. I will start with a short presentation about Volta, just to show those who are less familiar with it how it works, what it does. After that, we will have an initial discussion between the panelists to tease out different thoughts and reflections that this might trigger towards the different areas of expertise. But we're also very open to have discussion from the audience in the group and to come up with interesting insights together and respond to one another, as this is the purpose of actually this Volta prototype. Right, then I think we will start with a few words about the Volta reason for being there. So as part of the FAIR project in Work Package 3 that is run by RISE, we are working with an innovation process, and the objectives of this process are to develop speculative proposals of what a regional electric aviation could be like, and to actively involve stakeholders such as yourself, but also, for example, the public, in trying to understand what those speculative proposals could mean, what is good about them, what is bad about them, and what implications they might have. And this is also a way for us to help identify opportunities for new business models or other activities that could spin off from the FAIR project. And I think it's really important here to emphasize that the Volta prototype is not intended as a finished product. It's an experience prototype, as we call it in design research, something where making something experienceable and clear and concrete helps to sketch a possible future and help us shed a bit of light on this complex and difficult future. Now, the question that the Volta prototype specifically is looking at is what could flexible, on-demand regional electric aviation be like? We've talked in the past within these seminars and other electric aviation projects a lot about what the potential of this disruptive technology is, that planes could become cheaper or cheaper in some ways or more expensive in others, that they have different ranges, that they have different behaviors that they afford. But what does actually the system look like if we start designing for that, and what can we learn from that? This is the point of the FAIR Volta prototype. So it's very much a proposal to explore these possibilities. And you can try it yourself. If you go to this address, fair-volta.ri.se, you can actually try this and book a trip within the Kvarken region to get a feeling for how it works. So the question, like I said, is what could flexible on-demand flying look like in this particular region? So as part of this project, we developed an idea for an imaginary electrical airline called Volta that operates flights within the Kvarken region and has 10-seater airplanes to do this. And there are a couple of foundational values to the design of how this airline works that we've used to give shape to this prototype. The first one is that times and prices are flexible. So we're challenging the basic norm that there should be a schedule for airplane service. The second is that we reward flexibility. So that we try to aim for a direct relationship between the behavior of the customer and the price, for example, offered and the time offered by the airline. A foundational value is that we aim for full flights where possible. So trying to understand how we can actually push people to travel altogether and reduce the amount of flight movements, even if they are green powered. And lastly, that we connect directly to other forms of transport so that it becomes a door-to-door endeavor. So I'll say a little bit about how these key features came to exist. The first one is quite simple. The way it is built is that you book a trip from address to address. So you put in an address where you are going from and an address where you are going to. This as opposed to regular airport travel where you tend to book from airport to airport. The main feature also is that there's no schedule. So you book in asynchronous negotiation with others. This means that you see here in the image, for example, someone booking 4 seats. They try to select a time range when they are available to fly. So let's say from 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. And they do this in relation to earlier bookings that have been made that are shown in the background. And we have a particular way of calculating the cost, which is reduced for the amount of flexibility you have because you overlap with other people, but also gets even more reduced if you manage to fill a plane and in that way help to take a full plane off the board, so to say. The price and the time are both given as a range as a result of this lack of a schedule, which means that you get actually notification a couple of days before you go exactly when you would be traveling. Of course, you can adjust a little bit by being very inflexible, having a very specific time. You reduce the chance that this varies a lot. And if you are actually, if you're dealing with some insecurity about when and where you will actually be, it becomes even more important for regional air travel to be connected to other forms of transport, which is what we've tried to integrate within the booking as well, coming back to the address to address. This is a brief overview of the FAIR Volta prototype. I'm encouraging everyone to try it and to play with it on your phone or on your computer, fair-volta.ri.sc. But that being said, I would like to start discussing this a little bit. So the point of today is not to come to necessarily any serious conclusions about the only way that we need to go to be able to implement electric aviation in this region, but rather it is to talk a little bit about what is needed and where we need to think differently, where we could do things differently, or what potential we see in radically reinventing how we book travel or how we shape airports. So I think open discussion, open thoughts. Thoughts don't have to be finished yet, I think, to be interesting. So let's kick it off. I would like to start with you, Elisabeth, because we've talked a little bit about FAIR and Volta and how to possibly spin off into other forms. And I know that you have the tourism and business development point of view. Can you share a little bit what FAIR Volta made you think of and what you see as a potential?
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts here as well. So when I first heard about this Volta app, I immediately thought that it was a really excellent idea. And that's because in the other project that I briefly mentioned about, where we have the focus on the tourism aspect to activate regional airports and also like other European airports, but the same could be applied here in the Kvarken region. So our aim has been to identify the hidden gems for tourism, for business travel, for education travel, and also for tourism travel. So I somehow immediately thought that if only we could somehow integrate this aspect into this Volta app, so that would make it even more unique, because already what you presented in one of the workshops, it made me think that, well, this is definitely the future. And also last week when we traveled to Tartu, also Jeroen was with us there and presented the same idea there. So the response was the same there as well, that everybody thought that this was a great idea. So we are very much eager to take the next steps and look how to maybe even create another project around this idea, how to involve this Volta app and the development work that you have already done there into the tourism aspect.
Very nice. Yeah, and I hope today also talking about Volta and the challenges, and not just the opportunities, but also challenges we see with that, can help maybe in understanding a little bit how we can angle this project and how it can connect to other activities that are happening. I think I will just do a first round of going by every panelist and then see if there's something that sticks. Hampus, I would like to ask you also a little bit from maybe more of a technical perspective. What implications do you see, or what challenges do you see when we start the discussion based on this provocation, so to say?
Yeah. First of all, I think the Volta concept is really nice. It kind of helps to understand and come up with suggestions on how we can move forward. And when you get this, as you showed, visual interface where you have the opportunity to play around with an app like this. So as I mentioned in my short introduction, I'm a bit of a infrastructure nerd. That's what I do, and are mostly focused on, especially with connection to increase the electrification. So and I think that will be a quite important part here also, because one thing is the actual mobility services and the business model that put them together, so to say, but we need to ensure that we deploy the appropriate infrastructure to support new services like this also. Now, we might not see any massive demand or things like that in Sweden or in the Nordics. That makes it very difficult, but I think and I think like initial trials and tests are probably doable with existing infrastructure. But for example, if we are to enable some sort of scaling of regional electric aviation that doesn't look like the aviation that we know today, and uses different kinds of hubs and airports and different routes than we have today, we will have to at some scale invest in the appropriate infrastructure. And when I say the appropriate infrastructure, I mean that depends on what the future demand might be, how it will spread, etc. So you have to think about things like if we install too small scale infrastructure at the airports, we will risk limiting the growth of this service or this market. But installing too much infrastructure will place larger costs on, for example, the airlines or the operators maybe need to increase their have increased costs for landing fees or things like that to achieve a reasonable return on the investment for this infrastructure. So I think there's kind of a balance here that we need to understand, and I think a concept like Volta makes it easier for us to kind of predict what will the future look like, how will people want to travel, and when do they want to travel, and how much, so we can plan for that. So I think there's kind of two major things here as I see it, where one part is that, as I said, Volta as a concept could help us understand to what extent people would be willing to use a service like this, which would be very helpful in order to plan for the infrastructure that we need to deploy capacity-wise. And the other thing is that maybe this perspective could also be a part of the service and the business model. So, for example, as you showed earlier, the scheduling process and the pricing model in the app, for example, maybe they could include factors that benefits the use of the infrastructure. Like if we talk charging of the aircrafts, for instance, maybe it's preferable to in some way spread or allocate departures to different times or time frames of the day when the loads are smaller, or so to say, to lower the peak power demands, which could be more efficient and less demanding on the airport infrastructure. Or maybe as the I mean, the profitability of the infrastructure gets better the more it's used in terms of energy supplied. Maybe there should be, or another idea, so to say, is that there might be good to have a business case, for example, where companies could book things like cargo transportation at times where there is no passenger demand, and that way we can use both the airplanes and the infrastructure even more. So I think there are a lot of interesting things that could be mentioned and discussed and maybe included in this kind of thinking. So that we could really try to better understand what this could become in the future, which is needed in order to plan for this infrastructure that I'm talking about. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. But as I said, there's a lot of interesting things to discuss.
Well, yeah, thanks for those comments. I think there is a lot of things we can unpack today in what you just said. I'm going to try and park a few of them for now, but I'm going to go back to the first and the very first and the very last thing you said, talking about moving forward. And I think what I've seen in a lot of projects where there's such a complexity of changing these systems, what is super important and what we really need is a non-critical eye and a way to reimagine things in terms of how they should be and perhaps could be instead of how they are. And maybe I'm sitting too much on Melinda's chair, but I would like to hear your thoughts, Melinda, a little bit about how you can reflect maybe a bit from that point of view about what we are discussing today.
Yeah, well, I think the interesting part with the Volta app is like it's visualizing the questions and the assumptions that we have regarding travel. I mean, the point-to-point is one assumption that we actually point in the Volta app, but I think that's really, really important to question what kind of norms of travel do we have today? Like, how do we travel today, and from whose perspective are we building the infrastructure? For instance, we can see like if the Vinnova actually released a report where we could see that if men travel like women, we would reach our sustainability goals, which is really interesting. So, I mean, if we were to develop this application with a clear target group of women, how will that reflect on the solution? And how will it reflect on the implication and realizing? But I mean, as you said, Jeroen, the most important part about the Volta app is like we can, by visualizing this as an application, we can see what kinds of assumptions we actually have about travel today. And that, I think there is even more to dig into there, like where we travel, how we travel, and we can see if we look just look at men and women, we can see that men often travel further than women, and we can see that like the transport from to work, for instance, is the same amount of time today, but the distance is further because we have better transportation. So I mean, this is also things that affect how we travel and how the electric aviation will develop. So yes, it's very interesting when you like dig into what kind of people and different perspective they could see when they develop. This is a totally different area, of course, but the Volvo for women, they could see that men often do work to home with their car, but you could see that women travel and do more things during their travel. So they stop by the kindergarten, they go to the activities for the children, they go to a grocery store, so they have totally different travel, and this affects how we build this kind of systems. And I mean, the beauty with the electric aviation is that it can do shorter trips as well, and we have smaller planes, and so by implementing a norm critical perspective on this, I think we can do so many good things. Yeah.
Nice, very good. that's also very interesting to start to talk about the gender perspective more specific, because it was not, to be honest, not part of the Volta thing, but definitely something that I hope we can find a way to dig further into as we get along, and maybe find a spin-off project for this. One thing that I heard in kind of all of the discussions so far is different ways of talking about demand also, and I know that this is also something I've been researching within the project. And I'm curious, Elizabeth, if you can also share some thoughts about this chicken and egg question of demand and supply and demand, and if perhaps there are also ways that we can work with demand without really knowing it, or generate it maybe.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. That's actually one interesting possibility with this Volta app, because I feel that we could be paving the way for future electric flights by using this Volta app application already in this imaginary world before the electric flights are available. And we could be already creating the demand and testing the market, which could also work as a marketing tool for the tourism destinations that we identify and the hidden gems of tourism and the touristic potential in the region, so that we could be creating these different routes already in the virtual reality by using this Volta app. And if there would be a way to integrate this type of like virtual tours, that could open up also new opportunities to think of, you know, expanding or broadening the view in the Volta app. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it would be an interesting new possibility to try out also. Yeah, and yes, I think it would actually work really well for marketing the different routes and destinations, and also, yes, creating demand. And yeah.
I agree, and I think it would be worth exploring. And I don't know if there's any initial response from the panel about this. Otherwise, I have some thoughts, or from the audience even. Because one question I'm thinking about Hampus is, I guess this is your maybe a common challenge that you have, that we're talking about these very complex systems that are interlinked of technologies and people and ways of doing, and then we have a potentially disruptive technology. But how do we sort of start to turn the knobs of what needs to be changed, and to decide where to change what at what time? Because I think that is very much the complexity we started to uncover starting to design Volta. We had to stop at some point because it became too complex. But when you start thinking about the implications for investments and infrastructure, especially, yeah, I wouldn't know where to start or stop. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky question, and I mean, we're talking about something that looks quite different from how it looks today, and we're talking about making or connecting different kinds of transportation systems into one package, so to say, and every part of that system has to function and communicate with each other, and we need to assure that, for example, we have the both the business models and the infrastructure, and everything needs to work. And I think yeah, of course that gets more complicated the more we scale it. We could, of course, as I mentioned before, maybe the initial trials and things like that would be possible with the infrastructure that we have today. But I mean, at some point we need to start thinking about and understanding what the future could look like, and that's what I really like about this concept that we're talking about. That could maybe give us a hint about what it will look like, and we can move on from that point, so to say. But yeah, it's a really tricky question. I see there's some hands, maybe.
Yeah, no, this is what we're here for today. Tricky questions, I think. Johan, I think you were first. Would you like to contribute something to the discussion?
Is that me? There are
Yes.
usually many Johans everywhere I go.
You're the top one on my list.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. No, I have a kind of a stupid question, but what is the problem that you're solving with this on-demand booking compared to scheduled flights? What problem are you solving?
I'm not sure we're really solving a problem. Maybe we're creating new ones. I think we're challenging this idea that aviation is something that is booked a year in advance or planned a year in advance. We have discussed within several fair meetings and seminars this idea that why are we used to traveling like that? Is it a relic from the railways that it works like that for planes, or is it something that actually has a function beyond just being the status quo? So we're trying to explore, does it have to be like that? Which is not the same, I guess, as solving a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess this is more a kind of a research perspective than a maybe business perspective. It's kind of, I've heard so many times coming from a startup scene that having a solution and trying to find a problem for it is the wrong way around. But I guess this is more like research and exploratory.
Very much so, yeah. No, RISE is research, but I would like to invite Melinda to respond a little bit from that, if I can do that, because I think it touches upon non-criticism. I can see a link there.
Yeah, well, I think by exploring, you can visualizing, even when you don't have like a clear view of the problem, is also a way of finding new ideas. So, and I guess if we are questioning the norms within travel, we have to explore and question all the things we take for granted, and we take a lot of things for granted regarding travel. So I think this is a way of showing that we have these assumptions, and I mean, hidden assumptions is a gold mine for new ideas. So I think this is a good way of exploring what we take for granted. I don't know if that was what you were.
That's
yeah. But then I understand the perspective.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's a nice area you touch upon, Johan, and I think something that helps explain the purpose very much. I think Arne has raised his hand a while ago. Would you like to add to the discussion, Arne?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the back office system of the Volta. How have you made some? I mean, you have infrastructure that you're going to use, and I think there's a lot of limitations in the infrastructure, and your Volta is very flexible. And then I'm wondering the back office timeline and the limitations you put into it. Have you thought about that?
Well, let me put it this way. I think I would like you to think about it.
Yeah, I do all the time.
Yes, no, but the point is, we definitely had to make some assumptions, right? I mean, we ended up choosing for a particular size of airplane and the assumption that it would be possible to somehow end up flying them all around. We didn't think about how you have to maybe limit this, also build in some limitations so that it doesn't end up with all the planes in one place, for example, quite practically. But I would like to invite you actually to reflect a little bit on that, on maybe problems that you see just from what you've seen today.
And also like the timeline, when does the schedule when is it ready? I mean, how long before you go away is it scheduled?
In the prototype, we made it about 3 days, but then again, you could say if you actually fill up a plane, then you know that you can let the full plane go at a certain time. Then you could just tell everybody your plane is booked.
And another question is, I mean, is the electric regional air is it very suitable for this Volta on-demand app, or have you thought about other ways to travel? I mean, is it suitable? Is it extra suitable with electric air?
Well, I mean, I think I would say, to me, it seems more suitable than for transatlantic flights with 600 people in a plane. I think one of the things that I think Andreas maybe can comment on also. Andreas, you shared also last week in Tartu a vision of electric regional aviation as public transport, which has a lot of connotations and a lot of challenges and opportunities, I think, in it. But one of the, maybe carefully I can put it as contours of things that are coming out of FAIR in some way. I think it relates to that. So public transport, okay, maybe it has a schedule, but it is quite easy to hop a bus compared to hopping on a plane. So this could be one way in challenging the norm that plane hopping has to be very difficult and make it more accessible, for example.
Yes, I don't want to know if you wanted to comment but I
of
think
course, always.
Always. No, just saying that we have been through the advantages with electric aviation, such as environmental aspects, but also the lower costs and the possibilities for accessibility. And we ended up thinking about in certain destinations that there might be a societal value for this kind of transport. And then it could be considered, should you consider it as public transport? That's a question we have been discussing in the project. Because in that case, it could be, if you have societal values, you could argue that you could use it as a procurement actually from the public financing as a part of the public transport system. But that isn't, at least in Sweden, available right now from the regional level. That's not an option.
Yeah, no, that's a much better way of explaining it. Did you have your hand also raised to comment something from that group, Isaac?
I think Isaac is keen.
Go for it, Isaac.
Yeah, all right. No, I just wanted to add to Arne's question about if it's too flexible, there might be a lot of planes at the same time using the same infrastructure. And I think that one way of solving that would, of course, be through pricing, and to add maybe the extra cost of simultaneous power output onto or into this system, into this booking system, that if it seems like there are many planes scheduled at the same time, then maybe that will indicate a higher price for the traveler.
Yeah, no, I think that's a valuable comment. And actually, coming to think about, Arne, we could also look into how, because now you see in the background, you see other people that have booked planes. I mean, this could also be a mechanism that the airlines or the operators could use to create busyness at certain times, or to make it more, to nudge people. We're created a system to nudge people into sharing full planes, but that system can of course also be used to nudge people into certain directions, as Hampus was also suggesting, in terms of sharing planes or sharing other forms of air freight, for example. But I think it's a good point. I see we have a hand raised from Tartu, one of our friends at Tartu, I believe. Professori?
I don't know which one you are referring, but Tomi Oravosari from Southeastern Finland University.
Yes, sorry, I was referring to you.
Yes, yeah, I'm from I'm living in Vantaa and my office is in Kotka, so
right, sorry.
From Finland.
I mixed you up with someone else. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, but anyway, when I was looking at this app, I started to think that we have been talking a lot about passenger traffic, but how to say, drones are also part of electric aviation, and I think that we will see cargo drones very soon in future. And I started to think that could this kind of app be even more useful in reserving a cargo delivery, because there might be cargo that is very time sensitive and cargo that is not so time sensitive. So from that perspective, it could be that the sender who sends very time sensitive cargo can pay more and decide when the flight actually goes. And then those who are not so time sensitive, they pay less. So from my perspective, this could be very useful useful app for reserving how to say, cargo drones, slots from cargo drones.
Nice, that's a very good perspective to have also. Maybe, I don't know if Hampus, I saw you're nodding a little bit. I think this is close to your area. If you have any thoughts or comments on that.
No, not more than that. I agree. As I said earlier, it would be kind of a low hanging fruit to also utilize the times during the day when you do not have any passenger demand, for example, to use the planes. Even maybe you can even use the same planes as you use for passenger transport for cargo transport, and which means that you will utilize these vehicles even more, and the economics gets even better. So I totally agree. That's an interesting thought.
Nice, Elizabeth. I see you would like to share something.
Yeah, I think that was a really excellent idea, and because Seinäjoki is becoming the first drone port in Finland for this international unmanned aircraft company, Dronamics, that can carry up to 350 kilos of cargo within a distance of 2,500 kilometers in Europe. So I think this could be an idea to also propose to Dronamics to consider this, to take into consideration using this Volta app also for their system.
Nice. Yeah, let's look into it. Alka, I see you, or Melinda, go first. You're on the panel.
Thank you. Well, I also thought about this. I mean, the data we will have if we look at point-to-point travel, and we were talking earlier about the business case in this, and I think if we could share this between the stakeholders and the companies that are using Volta is kind of an interesting thought. And also I was thinking about regarding the target group of the users, like, can we also track the carbon footprint, and can I choose between different kind of travels regarding my carbon footprint? I think that would be also interesting if we can nudge people to take a more sustainable travel pattern. Yeah, just
A very nice point. I think it's a little bit also one of the thinking behind the Volta app is that we try to create these full airplanes that even if they are green, so to say, we still don't want to have more than necessary flying. But I agree, it would be really interesting actually to expand that a little bit more, make it explicit and part of the explicit choice of the consumer as taking part of this form of transport. Thanks for those comments. I think that we can go to Helka, who's raised their hand for a while. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm outside. I'm trying to use my camera. Hi, it's freezing here. I'm listening to the discussion. Thank you. It has been a really interesting session. I was wondering that it would be nice to hear your thoughts about the provider. You have been talking about the complexity of the system and the different issues related to this complexity. And one dimension there, I guess, is that the cross-border region in the context of FAIR project and the different legislative environments and so on and so forth. So in that case, thinking about regional electric aviation in the context of this kind of cross-border transportation, who do you think could be the provider of this kind of platform or app, and would be a private or a public provider or some kind of collaborative business model, bridging different interests? It would be nice to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you.
That's a very good question, Helke. I don't really know, to be honest. It's I think maybe I see Andreas and Isaac might have some thoughts that can relate to this, because you've been working on the Swedish side quite a lot. I've heard you about it, but I know you're also exploring a bit on the Finnish side. Do you have any thoughts about what different systems or actors or authorities might have to come together for this regional electric aviation, and what form that could take?
It's a difficult question, I would say. I think that if it's maybe the easiest way would be that it would be some kind of commercial actor would provide this type of service. But since it involves a lot of different actors and stakeholders with different perspectives, maybe it would be good to involve the authorities, but then it's like you were talking about, it's kind of different situations in the different Nordic countries, different institutions, different regulations to some extent that might make it a little bit more difficult. So yeah, not really an answer, but I think it's hard to pinpoint.
No, I agree. More food for thought, so to say. I'm thinking, and I'll invite the audience to raise your hand if you have any further remarks or things you would like to contribute to today's discussion. I'm thinking, since we have been talking for a while, I'm trying to think how we can zoom out a little bit from the specifics of the Zoom or the Volta proposal as one speculation, and maybe if we can reflect a little bit broader on what we see in terms of needs, maybe from our different points of view, when we look towards implementation of electric aviation, what we can all do or what we are interested in exploring, because I think that this is also a good forum to advertise one's interest and to see if there are connections to be made. So I invite everyone to share a little bit from that point of view. And I know, for example, especially Hampus also already has lots of ideas of things that he's involved in or that you are expanding towards. Do you have something to say from a more zoomed out perspective than from Volta?
Yeah, and I think I've already kind of touched upon it from my perspective. We have some ongoing project trying to answer or get some estimations on what the future will look like in terms of the, as I said, need for charging infrastructure, for example, on the airports. And the issue that we have is that the only thing we can model this out of is how the aviation or the flight traffic looks today. And since we're not talking today about how it looks today, but something entirely new, maybe we're talking new schedules, new routes, etc. We need to think about the connections to other modes of transports if we are to kind of puzzle it together into a service like this. So that would be really interesting for us in our other projects to build more knowledge together with, for example, Elizabeth, who mentioned the possibilities to maybe use this in a further project to to understand what the future demands will be and where it will be and when and so on. That would be really valuable for us to include in the other projects that we have, so that we can create better estimations on how the future could look like.
Nice. Yeah, I see definitely the link to the thoughts that Elizabeth was also sharing earlier. I think this idea of and fill me in if you want to expand a little bit on it, Elizabeth. This idea of bringing a possible future to the now, to see what it might take, might help a lot with this demand challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a really inspiring topic, because in a way we need to try to vision what will be in the future and what actually needs to happen in order for us to enable these things. So what we need to do now is, I think this Tartu visit is actually a very good example of how we are trying to create demand for future travel. So from 3 different perspectives, from the business travel, education travel, and the tourism travel. So as a business center, we aim now to continue our cooperation with Tartu, so that we start matchmaking companies, so that they get to know the potential business partners from our region and from the Tartu region. And then the same applies to education organizations as well, so that we make people travel. And Tartu is actually a really interesting city for students and for studying purposes as well. And then also for the tourism. So what we are trying to identify the hidden gems of tourism. So we need to start marketing those and to start creating the demand, so that people maybe, and if we can take it into a virtual reality first, so once people first experience it in a virtual world, later on they would really want to experience it also in the real life when the electric flights are available. And talking about flexibility, so that we really saw it in practice, that once you get this flexibility in flights, that you can fly in one day. Like it took only 45 minutes for us to fly from Seinäjoki to Tartu, and in one day we managed to have really intensive discussions there, which really inspired us for future development and cooperation. So I think the opportunities are huge. So we just need to try to vision them, and then think of the things that we need to start doing in order to make it happen.
Very nice. I think we have 2 more questions or comments from the audience, and then I would like to give the final word to Melinda. But don't worry, Melinda, I have a nice question, I think, for you. Johan, go ahead.
Yeah, just a brief reflection. I was just thinking that it makes maybe even more sense with this on-demand solution for the really short flights, the eVTOL flights, which would then be more like on-demand public transport within a region, rather than and that you book a trip with a car or by eVTOL. Same solution. Maybe that is an even more attractive application for this Volta app. Perhaps. That was just a reflection.
No, very good. Thanks for sharing that reflection. I agree. It could be worth looking into for sure. Isaac, what would you, or Andreas or Lars?
I was just going to say exactly the same thing as Johan. And I think that also, as I think it was Tommy who mentioned earlier, drones. So drones and vertical takeoff, both cargo and passenger transport could be suited for this type of on-demand service to a greater extent. And with that, I also think that since you're not dependent on the airports or the location of the airports, that might also be closer to what I think Melinda mentioned earlier about different travel patterns between different groups of people, that it might not just be point to point, but it might be easier to get closer to different types of destinations, and that could be a good thing. So I really agree with Johan's comment.
Very good. Actually, and I have one before we move towards closing it. I would really like to ask Melinda one question as the final statement from the panel, because I know you, Melinda. You were in the same unit, and I know that you are working in a lot of different projects with a norm-critical perspective. Not uncommonly so within perhaps more conservative industries or ways where there are very strong norms. Let me put it that way. And one thing that has come up in several of the FAIR webinars, I'm thinking, for example, of Rui Garzanski that had a lot of experience at Boeing before starting the Magni-X electric drivetrain company. He reflected a lot on the strong norms that exist within the airline industry and how things are done. So I just wanted to know from you if you have any advice for us that are working within this sphere and working with these developments, if you can reflect on how we stay norm-critical or become more norm-critical.
Oh, yeah, it's a big question. I'll try to answer it in 5 minutes now. I think that I haven't said that earlier, but I have been working a lot with the aviation industry. I've been working with the Nordic network for electric aviation and the fossil-free aviation projects that has been led by RISE earlier. I am a bit familiar with the aviation industry, and what I can say is that my reflection from that time is that it is very male dominated, and of course you can't take the human out of the development process. So I mean, just starting by including different people into the development process is I think very important. It's a good start. And that can be by adding more behavioral competence, designers, etc. That's one way of doing it, but also like start to see the benefits of using hidden assumption as a gold mine for new ideas, and really look into like when you choose to look at the problem from a different perspective, from a different kind of user that is not really in the room at the moment, you can see new solutions. And that's really the biggest benefits from norm-critical innovation. I talked about the Volvo car earlier. I don't know if you know this, but in 2004, Volvo took a Volvo concept car, and it was only female developers, and they were to develop a car for women. And I was a bit like annoyed back then, because they were really like forming stereotypes, and you have to be able to drive with high heels. And so it was a lot of things that was not really perfect in that process. But 10 years later, we could see that 50% of all the ideas that they have developed when they did the concept car is now standard in Volvo cars. And this is like one thing that was this back camera that you have when you are parking your car. The women were really eager to have that. The male didn't need it, but when they had it, they kind of used it. So it's like different target groups can explain different needs that needs to be solved. So I think by adding more different kind of people, different groups into this discussion is very important. So that's my advice.
Excellent. I think those are very nice words to close today's session with. So I want to thank our panelists, Elisabeth, Melinda, and Hampus. Thank you very much for taking the time to share some thoughts with us today. They were really great to have, and I hope also that everybody here that wants to reach out and connect and find opportunities to work with you or your expertise can do so. So thanks again for being a part today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I think I can just show one more slide of the FAIR project, that we are open for contacts and collaboration. So if you require any more information, if you want to get in touch, if you want to stay up to date on the further webinars that we will have, including one about Work Package 1 and regional effects later on in 2022, but also other seminars, then please get in touch, follow us on LinkedIn, or get in touch with us directly through these links. Thanks everyone for your participation today, and have an excellent Tuesday.